Welcome to Newfoundland Lens. This is episode number 8. And this week we have a special guest, Diane Davis. She got a Facebook group called the Iceberg Reports here in Newfoundland. And it's a great way to discover all the icebergs that we have coming down the shores from Greenland. And of course, we have our co-host here, Coy Babstock, as well. So
Morning.
we're going to have a
Diane.
good chat this morning about icebergs and where they come from and the Facebook group page that we could find for icebergs and all that good stuff on. So first, Diane, you could go ahead. When did you actually start this Facebook group?
This group actually started in 2015. In 2014, we had a bumper crop of icebergs. My husband and I went to Lumsden on June 14th, 2014, and without moving his feet, he counted 118 icebergs.
Wow.
Wow.
And we were all excited because on the government iceberg site at the time, they were showing 2 in Twillingate and 2 in Bonavista.
Wow.
So we took a bunch of pictures and we tried to submit it, and it turned into a whole summer of trying to submit iceberg pictures. And I thought there's got to be a better way.
Right.
So I started an iceberg group, Newfoundland Iceberg Reports on Facebook group in 2015. And at the end of the summer, we had about 800 people, and I thought it was a grand success. We only post in season current icebergs with location to avoid confusion and to help people to find them. The goal is to let everybody take their picture. I'm not a photography group. You guys have seen my own pictures. I can take a picture. I'm not a photographer. And I encourage people that I don't care if your thumb is in the image, as long as you can show us that there's an iceberg there and the location and the date. So last week at some point, the group went over 93,000 people.
Wow.
Oh, that's a lot. Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
I know not all 90,000 people are looking at every picture, but some of our posts so far this year have had 1,500 and 2,000 reactions to them. And I know already, I added the name Labrador into the page last year because we were finally starting to get some photographers from up there and I wanted to encourage them. So it's Newfoundland and Labrador Iceberg Reports all written out because I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
But we had somebody fly from Ontario last week to go to Twillingate just to see that iceberg. They'd been to Newfoundland before. They didn't see an iceberg. And they came back just to see that iceberg and posted beautiful pictures.
That iceberg in Twillingate this year has been a nice early start. Hey.
Oh, a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
It's over 3 weeks now, right down in the community, very easy to see from all kinds of vantage points. And the Twillingate crowd has been amazing. I have learned more place names in the last 3 weeks. I've learned them over the years from them posting and saying where they were viewing them from. I knew, a beautiful cemetery and some beautiful pictures taken out of there. So the Twillingate crowd has really done us well. They've got pictures up already.
It really couldn't have come to ground in a better place because you're right. The Twillingate crowd. I know I spent 2 months out there as the artist in residence, and of course I go back every opportunity I get. Twillingate crowd are amazing, and when something's going on in the community, they're really quick to let us know and share and promote, and they love people coming to visit. Mm-hmm. So it's couldn't have happened in a better spot really.
Well,
And they had a really, really light year last year. I think they only had one iceberg early in the spring. The year before, there were icebergs everywhere in Twillingate. It was incredible. And for people who are not familiar, when I say Twillingate, I mean Twillingate and region, because there's all these nooks and crannies that can have icebergs in. So 2 years ago, they didn't have a lot. So they were pretty thirsty when they saw that iceberg come in. And hopefully it's the beginning of more. No way to predict.
That goes and reflects what happened in our region, the Bonavista area. Last year was not a great year for ice. Previous year was like Twillingate. It was a bumper year. We had a couple of icebergs that grounded for multiple weeks at a time. So it was really great for us to be able to, Michael and I have been on the hunt for, the creme de la creme moose photo for a long time. We still have.
But it's great. It piqued the interest really early to have an early iceberg. It gives me an opportunity as the administrator of the group to explain a bit to the new members, which is difficult because we are getting new members every day. The other thing, if people are going looking for the group, you have to answer 2 very easy questions. They're open-ended questions and agree to the rules to get in. And that's just because we're getting so many spammers.
Yeah.
And the spam has increased in the last 3 days in every group that I'm helping in Newfoundland, all coming from one source, but shared by multiple profiles.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm a little bit, or appear to be tough to deal with. It's my whole classroom management skill. But it's to keep the group safe.
You gotta be. I mean, you gotta be tough and fair, right? I mean, you set rules,
Yeah.
you need to follow. And I know, I mean, I'm part of the group. Well, Michael's part of the group. The sign-in process was not difficult. The questions are not difficult, and adhering to the rules is not difficult. But you know, you got to put your foot down, and sometimes let people know these are the rules.
But that is the great
Yeah.
that is the great thing about the group is that you do manage it instead of watching all these, stuff that you don't rather see. It's just specific what you need. Iceberg, location, and the film we got a nice picture of it and stuff. You don't have all this other crap, I call it, that's in there that, just taking up your time and then if you leave it too much, then you get the bad stuff being put in there too that, we just don't need.
Well,
Yeah, really hard to make sure it's not divisive. I'm not afraid of the block button. A few of these people are my friends. I actually met one in Twillingate last week for the first time. We've been on the group together for years. So a few of them are my friends, but in general, these are just people in a Facebook group.
Yeah.
If somebody forgets where they are, they can go and take that someplace else. But it helps the group to work well. I don't mind people asking questions in the group. Some of the locals find it pretty repetitive when they keep asking, will we see an iceberg in September?
Here to have questions about icebergs, and for us being here, you might think that some of the questions are kind of silly, but realistically, when you don't know anything about it, it's the same as like if we go somewhere and we ask a question, if we don't know anything about lions in Africa, we could ask a question that's silly,
It's not within your context. People, last year, we didn't have a lot of icebergs. The boys in Triton had one iceberg that they toured for over 40 days with 2 tour boats, and they had a bumper year.
Yeah.
But on a year when there's very few icebergs, there'll be a whole lot of people commenting on the page that, well, that's the end of icebergs. And then the year before, when we had hundreds of icebergs all down the coast from the end of March, they were commenting, well, that's the end of icebergs. So even just the understanding of icebergs and the understanding of climate change and what impacts sometimes what people come in with, even if they don't know about icebergs. So one of the things that I try to explain a few times a year is that the icebergs that we see in Newfoundland, by the time they're coming down that Labrador Current, past Labrador and past the island of Newfoundland, they're 3 years, 2 or 3 years on the ocean since they've calved from Greenland. And I think it's really interesting that when they leave Greenland, they don't come straight down. They circle counterclockwise because of the currents. Like there's a lot of incidental information. If I ever get on Jeopardy for icebergs, I'm going for the 1,000 just in case. But it takes 2 or 3 years to get there. So what we see in a particular season doesn't reflect what's happened in Greenland that year. What we see from shore doesn't reflect how many icebergs there are because we only see a small fraction. You guys know this. The currents and whatnot take most of the icebergs hundreds of miles past Newfoundland. We never see them. The guys out on the ship see them. And this year, they're tracking across the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
They're very, very deep across the ocean again. So I don't know what that's going to mean for what we see from shore. We'll just have to pray for the right kind of winds.
Yeah, strong northeast winds, hopefully. It
Yeah.
won't be very nice for
Yeah.
the weather for people wanting to go out in shorts, but at least we'll get icebergs.
Well,
That's right.
people visiting Newfoundland aren't visiting for the weather, so they're visiting to see.
Well, it was a minus 23 wind chill for all the pictures taken yesterday.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Twilling Gate.
and everybody had a smile on their face. Like
Yeah.
there's nobody
Absolutely.
complaining about the cold when they're the
Mhm.
Nightbird
No,
photographs.
no.
I remember one season we were up doing photography tours, and we were up in the out in Cape Spear, and it was the middle of July, and it was the first time that I went up there without snow pants on. That's the year we had like bumper icebergs, like icebergs
Yeah.
all around St. John's everywhere. It's like probably like look out in Cape Spear, you probably see 7 or 8 just out there, floating around. But we had a lot
Yeah.
of northeast wind, and it was really cold. But yeah, going up in the morning, I remember it was the first time. It was middle of July. I went up the first time with no snow pants.
And that's the thing about this bird, because it's so early and the weather is still so cold, it's not changing a lot.
It's
It's
funny you
not being
mentioned
impacted by warm air. It's not being impacted by warm water.
Well-
So, we're 3 weeks in and it hasn't had a lot of change. There hasn't been a big thundering. It's all still one iceberg.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at before we started the podcast today. This popped on and had a look at some photos. It's just to refresh my memory, and there's not been a lot of change in size or even profile on that iceberg since the first photo was posted, which is incredible. But you're right, because it's been so cold. It's not, and
Yeah.
we're moving a lot. So yeah, really cool.
Yeah,
I tease people on the page, tell them that's how we keep them fresh.
yeah.
Funny for me, and Michael, you've experienced this 1,000 times. I know is how passionate people from away are about the icebergs. And like I've had guests, we were down in Bonavista and there was an iceberg way on the horizon, looked like a little thimble of ice right on the horizon. And the lady almost started crying because she saw her iceberg. And I'm there and I'm feeling bad as a Newfoundlander because, I've been within, meters of them. But she was just like thrilled and so thankful to see this little piece of ice on the horizon. And it's one, I'm sure you feel the same way, makes us realize, but sometimes we don't appreciate what we have here on our doorstep ourselves. And, to see the passion that these people have for icebergs and just, to be here and take those in, very rewarding for me. It's that part of it's more rewarding than seeing the iceberg, seeing the reaction of people to the icebergs, right? And like I said, it doesn't need to be a big reaction. Doesn't need to be a big iceberg story. It could be a little small thing on the horizon, and they're out of their mind about it, which is fantastic.
And it is a bucket list item for a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's people who travel certain places for certain reasons, interests, hobbies, whatever. I will go anywhere to see an iceberg. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous how far we will drive, even at a bumper year, to see icebergs.
Yeah.
We've been to Twilling Gate twice since this one came in, which, considering we've got a lot of things on the go, is pretty good. And it's just a special thing for people if they've come and that they want to see it. If they're fortunate enough to get an iceberg that comes in close and they can see the size of it, actually understand the majesty of it.
Yeah.
The iceberg that was in Fairyland in 2017.
Yeah. The monster.
I was in New York City and got a message from someone. Are you available to do an interview about the iceberg in Fairyland? And I'd seen it on the news in Sardi's Bar in Broadway, the Newfoundland iceberg.
Yeah.
On the news. So I said to her, I'm not in Newfoundland right now, but here's my number if you need to talk to me. So, iceberg expert, here I am doing interviews on that iceberg. And I mean, that's the one that I'm sure everybody photographed, but that's the one, Michael, that you did, isn't it?
Yeah, this one was on the international stamp.
Yeah. So they're symbols of Newfoundland and kind of Canada in general when people realize where Newfoundland is.
Yeah.
Another one was the one in Little Harbor that Doreen Daly took a picture of a few years ago. I think that may have been 2017 too. And that one was kind of a big round shape. They get into a hole in there behind that little bungalow. And it's just this great shot to frame up. And that one had kind of a chimney on it. And once it melted down a bit and ground against the seabed, it started to rotate because it was in a hole, but it couldn't get out.
Right.
So the sea and the tide were making this chimney part move from one side almost all the way over to the other side and back. And then there was this big explosion for people who were convinced that it had to be Photoshopped. There's no way you could do that. So there's all these things now that I'm learning about icebergs.
Yeah.
One in Elliston a few years ago, Elliston, Maberly area, got in a trench. And once it loosened from that trench, it went back and forth from Catalina to Maberly for weeks. That one I saw on my birthday, January 24th. And it never left until April.
Yeah.
So when people say, when is iceberg season? I've seen them in January and I've seen them in September.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't tell you to spend money to try and see them in either of those months.
Right.
Yeah.
May and June, historically, or when we have the best chance to see them. And on our good years, April, May, June, into July.
Yeah. The one in Fairland, that was there in April. I think that one showed up.
Yeah.
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 And there's a lot of, like I said, I always find there's always one iceberg per season that stands out above the rest. Like you said, that one.
Yeah.
There was a couple of years before that, there was one that showed up there in St. John's right behind Fort Amherst Lighthouse. That was a special one. And then one year we had the arch one out in Cape Spear. That was pretty cool. Well, like you said, and the other two that you mentioned. And there was one too out in Upper Amherst Cove. The one looked like a statue.
Yeah. Well, that one started as an arch. We were out there for a night. And as we were leaving, I could just see this. I tell people you have to have iceberg eyes. So it's drizzly and foggy, and I could just see this something looming. But you couldn't tell what it was, and we had to get back to Gander because Leo had to go to work. So I took a picture, posted it on the page, and I said, people should watch this. I said, this is the best shot I. By the time I got home, the sun was out, and it was this huge, beautiful arch.
Nice.
And then that one eventually, the arch collapsed. That stayed as an arch for a long time. But then it got those statue figures. I mean, buses were pulling into Amherst Cove, altering their route just a little bit to make sure that the people saw the iceberg.
Learn how to capture the best images and develop your camera skills with workshops held in Newfoundland and Labrador's most inspiring natural landscapes. Newfoundland Photo Tours. Book your workshop today.
And I grew up with tourism. My mom worked for Department of Tourism in Prince Edward Island. I know the economic value of having an attraction. And icebergs are an attraction. We can't predict them. That's the downside. But if a community is able, even on a temporary measure, to find some kind of benefit from an iceberg that's in their harbor, like get the firemen to put on a dinner, lunch by the firemen as a fundraiser.
Yeah.
Like there's very little open right now in Twillingate. Breakfast is really good at Robbins, and they also serve it for lunch.
Yep.
Mary Brown's is open.
Yep.
And 99 North Pub does deep fried food, and it's always hot and the beer is always cold. That's it for sitting in to eat in Twillingate. There's a Thai restaurant that's takeout. They were closed on the Monday we were there. In the season, there's a whole lot more options, but there are small communities that luck into amazing icebergs that if they had the foresight or the quick response skill to say, this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, we're doing soup supper at the
Legion or something.
Water Hall or the Legion or the Church Hall, and this is how much it is, and we're trying to raise money to fix the roof.
Yeah.
I'd post that on my page, and I'd fill them up.
Yeah.
So there's ways that the other thing is going out on boat tours, and people don't understand that if the iceberg is on the horizon, like that thimble out in Bonavista, Vista, you can't do a boat tour out there. If you want to see that iceberg, you got to sign on to a crab boat and you're going to be gone for a couple of weeks. So getting people to understand that even if you can see it from shore, that's still kind of the tour boat distance.
Yeah.
They will take you out. You'll get a much better view. Go with someone who's licensed and insured and inspected, please, because I personally have seen people take great risks with tourists aboard their boat, and that's why I stick with that on my page.
Yes.
The stuff that I have had to delete that was just reckless, that would lead to an inquiry, that just doesn't go on my page, because I'm concerned about liability. I'm concerned about people coming here and thinking, oh, this is just what Newfoundlanders do.
Right.
So, I promote those proper boat tours who spend all the money on the equipment and the wages and the insurance. And, it's amazing to see an iceberg from the boat. One of the best tours I did was out of Bonavista Vista and zero visibility. It was the last tour that guy did for a couple of days. It was so foggy, but of course he had instrumentation. We went out full hour and a half, and then it came upon this most amazing iceberg, and he took us around and around and around because it was the only one. And then he took us back, and just to come out of the fog onto that iceberg, even with no light on it, it was incredible. So icebergs are there in the rain. The whales are there in the rain. Just dress for it.
Yep. Oh yeah.
What?
We've got there that Zodiac tours where it's been absolutely miserably cold and misty and wet and miserable, but all that gets forgotten pretty quickly when you come upon the iceberg.
Yeah.
You can get your shots, sir.
But when you say that the icebergs, it's hard to see in the fog. Well, of course, the iceberg is white and the fog is pretty much white or gray. Well, I remember once we were out with Discovery Sea Adventures with Bob and Bonavista, and when there was one out in Kings Cove, maybe that's when you're even talking about, and it was a massive iceberg, and we went out there, and we drove around about, like I said, 15, 20 minutes, even with GPS. He'd been there and knew where it was, but we still couldn't see this, like a big old building or a big old hotel in the middle of the ocean, and we just got round and around, and finally the sun broke through like a little bit, and we could saw it, and like you said, it was amazing.
Yeah. And we have such good tour operators.
Yeah.
Oh,
I haven't been out with Bob yet, but I have lots of people who have been.
Yeah.
And they don't just do icebergs. They've all got local knowledge and history. They've all got personalities.
Yeah.
They can talk here. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just a boat ride. It's an adventure. It's entertaining.
Yeah.
Sea of Whales out that way. I know they do whale identification. People ask me or ask on the page, which is the best tour company to go with. And in places like Trinity, Bonavista area and Twillingate and St. Anthony area, who have multiple tours, I tell them their selection really is what kind of boat do they want to go on.
Yeah.
right.
Do they want to go on a typical tour boat? Do they want to go on a tour boat that offers a cabin for some shelter if they need it? Or do they want to do a Zodiac? Because it's different experiences of probably the same icebergs.
Yeah. For photographers, we always recommend Zodiacs. We're a bit biased.
Yeah, I would think so.
But now there's some people that comes here, and if their mobility issues are a bit older and they want, like you said, be in the warm and just get closer, then of course we do that as well.
Yeah.
But for pictures
You
with the
get
Zodiac,
empty-
you get lower to the ground and you get more. It's just better for pictures, basically, with the Zodiac. And I'm biased. The Zodiac is my favorite place in the world. So
As
Yeah.
I will say, myself and Michael will both, if we could get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and stay in the Zodiac till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, we're good.
for me, I like to go out in the Zodiac in May month and come back in the August.
I've said from the beginning, because I didn't want members to be intimidated by photographers, right? Because I didn't want it to be seen necessarily as a photography page. like gets a lot out of the feedback from the page. And I have a second man in Twillingate too, who just because personal reasons, this has kind of been a real safe space and encouraging space for them. I've had this happen a few times. I've had a couple of people who had medical reasons and couldn't take pictures anymore, and they find it, kind of meets that need for them. It's a community thing that I never expected. I can take a picture of the same iceberg. I can even break out the camera instead of the phone, but it's not going to be the shot that I've got. So it's for all levels of iceberg watchers.
Yeah. And that's reflective to what we see, not only with icebergs, but other things as well. Like, people were puffins, for example. You get people, everybody taking their photos with their cell phones and things. They're getting their photos and their memories, their personal time with whatever they're taking photographs of. But then you've got people who are taking, the more artistic photos, we'll say, that that people like to put on their walls or whatever. But that doesn't devalue the personal memories that you're getting from taking your cell phone pictures or your own photos for your own use, right? Yeah. It's capturing a memory. And it's
and I understand that professionals want to go back. They maybe want to work that photo a little. They maybe want to, get it just to the professional grade, because that's your job, that's your product. So by the time you've had a chance to do that, it might be past the current time to post on the page. We did have one summer, maybe a couple summers, where photographers would just take a picture from the display on their camera with their cell phone and post it and say, this is the shot I just got. I know out in Fairyland one year, there was one that they get nicknamed. I think somebody called it the jewels or the 5 jewels or something. There was one that had all different pieces going off. It was really spectacular. And every now and then somebody would take a picture just to the back of their foot.
In there, yep.
Which I think is an issue for the government page. It's really hard to post there. It just seems to take a lot of juice to get something up on that page. And hopefully they'll find a way around that. I would love it if they were getting all the icebergs. Yeah. I would have so much less time on Facebook. But right now it's still working and it still seems to be preferred. And I will again today encourage people to post to the other sites, use multiple sites, but contribute to them.
Yeah. That's what I find. Like I said, when it comes to the Facebook group, you can sort it by time and stuff as well. And when you look at the Newfoundland Labrador page, if you go and look at a page or look at an iceberg, it's probably like a week old. And we know a week of an iceberg is either broke up or probably moving unless it gets in a trench. So that's why it's important with social media. It's there right away for you.
Yeah, and it's an actual photograph taken. Like I'd say 85% of our pictures, all of them right now, are from land. There have been a couple of boats out, but an icon either on the tourism site or on the Environment Canada site doesn't indicate the size of an iceberg, where it's actually located, if you can see it from land. So there's a lot of misunderstanding sometimes when they see those. Like if I post the ice chart right now, there are icebergs that are halfway across the Atlantic, almost back to Greenland.
Yeah.
And people get all excited because there's so many icebergs.
People have it's the concept of scale, right? You don't understand the distances that are involved in the trip. Like we run into that a lot, Michael, as well. Like people don't understand how big Newfoundland, the island, is.
Right.
And I'm sure, Diane, you've come across that on the webpage too. Like we're in St. John's, we're going there for a couple of hours. We see there's an iceberg on the Northern Peninsula. Well, we take a day trip up there to see that, and because they have no concept that's a 12-hour drive.
Yeah, and it's just a full lack of understanding of the place. There was a lady this week whose mom was visiting and she really wanted to see an iceberg, but she didn't have time to drive her to Twillingate. Would she be able to get on a boat from St. John's and go up and see it?
Right.
Yeah. Right. And it's just not an understanding of how many hours, and they were at the North Atlantic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no concept. Like I tell people that all the time. We're talking about how long it takes to drive, say, from Port aux Basques to St. John's. And they're like, really? Is that big? Is the speed limit 50? Yeah, or because they can't grasp that there's that kind of a
Yeah.
distance. So it's the same thing with your church. I mean, they're seeing an indication of an iceberg that could be 400 kilometers offshore, but that doesn't register because they can see the island and the iceberg on the same chart, but they must be able to see it.
Yeah.
Take a tour through this land's incredible vistas, wildlife, and your own creativity with an immersive guided photography tour. Get that perfect shot. Newfoundland Photo Tours. Book your tour today.
I have a couple of guys who pop up now and then. One's a cook on a vessel that goes up into the Arctic, and he'll toss me some pictures now and then, and he will actually take a picture of where he is in the ocean,
Yeah, I think I saw
just to get
those.
people, right? And that's great because it kind of, it's general knowledge. It's the teacher in me that there should be some general knowledge around this and some awareness of geography and climate and even our temperatures. Like my poor little crocus are all up in Gander. Now they just got snowed on today, but they are totally not supposed to be up because it's just, we haven't had snow in Gander this year. And it's climate change or cyclical, whatever you want to call it. That's the other thing I have to watch on the page. Sometimes someone will post a scientific article, and it will be relevant to the page. And unfortunately, because of politics, but generally divisiveness, rhetoric, and repeating rhetoric, it dissolves into name calling. And it's really unfortunate
Yeah.
that we can't do a little bit more education like that. But in order to keep it a safe space, I often can't allow science.
Yeah, it's funny how science became
Yeah.
politics at some point, right? And it's sad.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
If you end up, sometimes, you have to be careful. Even a conversation bringing up that climate change is causing something when you're with
Yeah.
Michael and I with our tours, because you don't know. I mean, your guest could be a climate denier, or it could be any number of things happening, and you don't want to tarnish a good trip by inadvertently getting into that territory, right?
And if you get people all of a sudden on two sides of anything, then you're carrying tension all the way through, and it's hard. And that's the other thing for the Iceberg page. It's a refuge for some people.
Yeah.
They can
Yeah, you do.
go there, know what to expect. The other thing, of course, that I sneak in, and you guys know this, are things about to come from away musical, because I'm from Gander, and through no fault of my own, I'm a character in a Broadway play. But I keep that in there now and then. I try to limit it a bit, just so that people who are coming to Newfoundland might be able to get that experience of seeing the musical and getting a feel for Newfoundland. One-word answers, and they work fine. And I'll check a profile here and there. Sometimes it's big, long dissertations of why they want to be in the group. And I get so many people in that group who have a link to the military base in Argentia.
Yeah.
They were born there. They worked there. Their father worked there. It's phenomenal, in particular to that base, which I find really interesting because that's not an iceberg area either.
No.
But they stumble across the page, and it brings back these memories of being in Newfoundland. So I think that's way cool too.
Well, I like that. I like what you say. The number of times expressed to me, and Michael to speak on this too. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So it's an opportunity to I don't want to say educate, but you're educating people on what we are and what we're all about. I mean, that's a lovely opportunity, and that's part of it for me as a tour operator. You probably get the same pleasure out of it operating the Facebook page. There's a certain amount of satisfaction in sharing your culture with other people who might not have known about that, to the depth that they do when they leave. So, yeah, it's fantastic.
I saw that, like, you come from away there from New York, and you get a sense of pride and stuff when you're sitting there in the theater and everyone else is around, enjoying it and stuff like that too. So we do have, like I said, a lot of history there as well. When it comes to like the shapes and stuff of icebergs, do you find that some iceberg shapes get some more interest on your page than others, or?
Oh yeah, definitely the pinnacles and the arches and things like that get more interest. I love them all, but I like big old tabular
Oh, yeah,
icebergs
really?
just because of the mystery of what's underneath them.
Right.
So 2019, there was this huge tabular iceberg that went down into Seal Cove near Bay Vert. And it was massive. It's just this great big old flat. And it went in March and it stayed there. And the last of it, the last time we saw it was in August. So
Right.
it was there for a long time. Then it started to transform. Then it was a couple of icebergs. Then it was 3 icebergs. I think it went up to probably 4 or 5 icebergs, but they all stayed in that location. So I like seeing those big flats come because if they get in to the right location, and I know out in Twillingate a couple of years ago, there was a really big flat one along with all of the others. Um, I just like the mystery of them.
Yeah.
And there was the one that was in Elliston was like that. It came in January. And there was a guy from New Brunswick who actually flew from New Brunswick in January or February to drive to Elliston to see that big flat iceberg. Right. So, but yeah, the pinnacles and the one in Twillingate has been great because it's grounded in a spot where you can put it from multiple angles. So it, like going in a boat tour, it's different on all the faces. But in Twillingate, you can do it from land right now and see that one from multiple angles. And then you guys know, because you're photographers, when the light changes,
Oh, yeah.
when the light,
Huge difference.
when
Yeah.
certain clouds, certain skies, like we've had some pretty good sunset shots on it.
I always like
There's,
blue hour
there's
as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's just the light that comes up there. Um, I've done different kinds of workshops and yoga and Reiki and all different stuff, but there are some people who use crystals. Often it's a small crystal on a string and they hold it and then the crystal will rotate either clockwise or counterclockwise. Whether you believe that or not, there are people who do that and they use that to make decisions. I met one lady who said, I take it to the grocery store and I decide what produce I'm buying. But icebergs are my crystals.
Yeah.
They're healing energy for me. Like it's just ridiculous. Like my husband knows that if I say there's an iceberg in wherever, that he just might as well gas the car up because we're on the road.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing that I try to do through the page, and I need to promote that again, because I'm a big believer in tourism and boosting our own economy. I will pack a lunch. I'll pack snacks when we go on the road because you never know what's open. But if there's an opportunity to buy a meal, I will buy a meal wherever we are. Depending on how far we're going, we'll leave on a half tank of gas and we'll gas up into smaller communities to try and leave a little bit of money in that community. I have on occasion been known to pick up a bottle of Bailey's because I didn't need something else. But I think it's important, even if you're doing a day trip, to drop a few dollars in these communities to spread things around. There wasn't a lot open in Twillingate when we were there. We went to Foodland and bought some ready-made stuff that was reasonably priced and really fresh and delicious. And we went out for breakfast. But dropping a few dollars in these communities is a good idea. There was an iceberg in Hampton early on in the page, maybe 2015, maybe 2016. Anyway, it was like right at the dock. And there's no place to spend money in Hampton except for, I think it was the Clover Farm grocery store. So I was telling people, when you go to Hampton, buy snacks at the grocery store. Leave money in that community.
Mm.
So I think that's another important aspect. And as an individual, I can say stuff like that. This is a hobby page gone berserk. So I can see that where a government page can't say that, or where, when a business might criticized for, well, how come you didn't spend it here and you spent it there or whatever. But I think it's important that we, especially as staycationers traveling around, drop a few dollars in a neighboring community. And, we gassed up in Somerford on the way, and there's those people need gas stations and restaurants and things open year round, and they can't stay open year round while they dependent on the small populations in their community.
Uh,
So tourist dollars dropped all over the place and tourist taxes spent all over the place, I think is a wonderful thing. All for that. And locals too.
that's what I find in the summer when it comes to fish and chips. I driving around in different places. There's more fish and chips and more different restaurants. I should do a story on the best fish and chips around the island, because I think every little place that I see, a little place that has like a little restaurant and a
Yeah.
little town, I usually go in there and see what they got.
Yeah, they got
Absolutely.
and yeah, and there's different little tidbits now and then I'll tell people, like if you're staying in an area, you can often buy fresh seafood or frozen, which is still better than anything you're getting anywhere else, from the fish plants. You go to the storeroom, and so out in Fogo Island, I can go out in Fogo Island and I can buy a pound of scallops, or I buy crab or shrimp, and it's local. It's money staying in the community, and it's so much better than anything you're going to find laying on ice in a grocery store.
And the other piece too of that is, if you go out and you go to a grocery store, if you chat with someone about anything, if you're looking for not just an iceberg, about where can you get anything, or do you know that there's some foxes up the road, like you talk to locals, and everyone is always more than happy to help you with anything.
I
Absolutely.
saw pictures yesterday and the day before of a ring-tailed pheasant and fox out in Twillingate too, in the general area.
Pheasant.
And I also tell people I
yeah.
don't mind a couple other pictures snuck in. My meals will often get snuck in on my iceberg posts, just to let people know where there are places to eat. I limit the business people who will put up 18 shots of their bedrooms that they rent
Right.
with one iceberg. Find your balance,
Yeah.
right? Because all other places for that. But generally people understand it, and they're good. And like, I love the museums. It's hard when we depend on summer students to work places, and summer students are already still in school. So I understand why places aren't open, but it's still difficult, even for the residents. If you've only got 2 places to eat, when you're in the summertime, you've got a whole bunch. And in the summertime, you're working and you're busy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a Thai food place in Twillingate. I'm going on a weekday next time. They're closed on Mondays. So I'm going to have that figured out for the next time.
Cool. So
Perfect.
I just wondering, do you have any like future plans for your Facebook page, or just kind of keep same as you're going, or any special announcements?
I think we're just going to keep it as it is. And every year I kind of have to say, yeah, okay, we'll go one more year, because it is a lot of work. It is a passion and obsession, but it's a lot of work. If I'm away from home for a day, it builds up. And again, I would love it if there was another site that was as immediate, being supervised and whatnot, because that would be less time on me. I got some life issues on the go right now, so I'm just kind of going one season at a time. This will be my summer to chase iceberg.
Yeah.
I'm not working this summer. I've reprioritized my icebergs. But yeah, we're going to go for this season. If something untoward happens with, I stay on Facebook a little bit reluctantly, because I can't find another platform where I can build these kind of communities. So as long as the page, I'm able to maintain it and keep it safe, it'll stay there. If one of these days something big happens, I won't be starting again. I
Yeah.
just can't do that. But I've certainly proven that it can work if you want to put the time to it. There are other Newfoundland / iceberg type pages on Facebook. And that's good. That's all well and good. But they're not devoted to current with location
Yeah.
because they don't have time to admin and maintain like that. And the other thing I worry about is there's a bunch of travel type pages and photography type pages that are just stealing images. I'm sure you guys have both experienced this, stealing images and passing them off as their own.
Yeah,
cropping out,
it's huge too.
yeah, cropping
Well,
out signatures, things like that. So if I see any of those trying to join my group, they're blocked.
Mm.
So they might find pictures, but they won't find them directly off my group. Just because I know even sometimes the commentary and stuff that they add to it is not accurate.
no,
You see the, Little Harbor iceberg identified as being in Fairyland, things like this. So I'll
Well-
keep at it for a while until I don't. But I'm committed for this season. 2 girls who helped me were very much like-minded and have low tolerance for foolishness. I posted the Iceberger game the other day where it's a 2D model, but you can draw an iceberg and then it will float it.
yeah,
And I had 5 men answer the questions so they could join the group so that they could post a picture of the penis that they drew. I taught school for 30 years. I don't have time for that. I really, if that's your only objective in joining this group, block.
boy, oh boy.
But I like the camaraderie in the group. Sometimes I'll post and say, I had to block these things for this reason, and there'll be that many people praising me up that I'll have to turn off commenting. Someone did check me on a date the other day. I mistyped a date. I corrected it and thanked her. And I said the only thing I can figure is all the rest were afraid to correct me. So, but it's good, and I will get messages occasionally from people in the group asking for a little bit of advice on something, or and I try to be honest. It's a lot of pressure if somebody says to you, do you think I should fly down next week to see that iceberg?
And-
I don't know what their means are, and I don't know where the iceberg's going.
Yeah.
As soon as you say it, it could break up and flip over, and it's gone within an hour.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
But it's fun seeing how many repeat visitors there are. Even when they're joining the group, people will say, we've been to Newfoundland twice, but we've never seen icebergs, so we're coming again in May.
Yeah.
Or a lot of people are planning their trip for next year. I'm bilingual, so I get a lot of people from Quebec, but also from other French-speaking countries. People come from all over the world to see
Yeah.
icebergs.
Absolutely.
It's phenomenal. And if they come and they spend that money and they don't see an iceberg, they may have to settle for whales,
That's what we do too. That
Yeah.
on our
lobster, and scallops, and our music and our scenery. And they'll
Terrible.
come back. It's sin. It's sin for
Terrible.
them, really.
Yeah.
They'll come back. And the same thing happened with Come From Away the first season in Gander. There was an outbreak of COVID for a week. Shows were canceled for a week. People had traveled from all over. And I met 2 groups at the airport, and they were giddy. All the other stuff that they had done. We had a Newfoundland experience. And we're going to come back next year and see the show.
Well, something we find is people that actually come here, they're usually coming back and again or buying a house here.
Yeah.
That's
I met a guy one time on Fogo Island. He was staying at the inn, and I was working out there just for a week. Friends were away from their business. And I was just filling in for a week. Of course, he had this great big camera around his neck, so I was immediately chasing him. And I asked him if he'd seen the iceberg. And he was from Poland. He didn't know we had icebergs, and he didn't know that there was an iceberg there. So I said, how long are you staying? He said, we leave tomorrow. I said, when you go back to the inn, tell them you want to see the iceberg off Brimstone Head. And I had a call from the inn the next day saying, Mr. So-and-so just checked out, and he wanted me to make sure that you knew that he got his pictures of the iceberg. But he was here and had no idea we had icebergs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, and I know that myself from traveling. I go places and thank goodness learn all kinds of things while I'm there. And I think travel's a big gift as much as the icebergs are, and it's a luxury. I understand that. I never would have seen a Broadway musical if I wasn't in one. That's another luxury. But um, if you can afford a tank of gas, or if you've got a buddy who can afford a tank of gas, most of us can go and see an iceberg. And
Yeah.
I have many Newfoundlanders who have never seen an iceberg.
Yeah.
One lady from Corner Brook who was on her way, we met in Triton, and she was so excited. And I said, "How did you know there's an iceberg in Brighton?" She said, "This page on Facebook." And when I tell them it's my page, it's as exciting as the whole Come From Away thing. It's ridiculous. And she was so excited that she was going to get to see an iceberg. And that was a magnificent iceberg to see for the first time. So it's kind of like the assumption that all Newfoundlanders are fishermen. Not all Newfoundlanders have seen an iceberg.
Yeah.
Oh,
We get a lot of newcomers who are excited to see them, and a lot of international students. There's a lot of international students on my Facebook page.
we see that a lot. Like you said, the iceberg. Look, we talked about in another podcast about how many Newfoundlanders hadn't seen a puffin before.
Mm.
Right? It's the same things. People from here, I guess, and almost like there's an assumption that, well, I'll get there sooner or later, but then
Yes.
later never arrive, right? So we always
Yeah.
tell people, well, now's the going. Go, just go see it, go visit, right?
Yeah.
Because you
And
never
some
know.
people, as we say, aren't fussy about icebergs, because if they grew up someplace where icebergs were a hazard to the fishery for their
Right.
family and it was nothing but a nuisance, it's a whole different background to an iceberg. But I
Yeah.
took a friend who lives in St. John's, from St. John's, and as we're driving across the causeway going to Twillingate Isle, there was just ice pans around. She's like oohing and eyeing, and we're kind of looking at each other and just waiting for the impact, the silence of them for something so huge.
While they break, that
Right.
rumble.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
the present
Right.
for the presence of them. Like if you get them in a cove, like I know out in Greats Cove, like you get a big massive iceberg that's just floating in the water behind this little small house, and it's just like the presence of something that's there. And then when they break up, it sounds like the loudest thunder you ever hear. Like it's just everything about them is just And then when you get up close on the Zodiac, and you see all the details, and you just see the veins or the blue in the ice, and you can even feel like the coolness of them and stuff. And then when they break up, sometimes you'll get the air bubbles from the ice, and you hear them like fizzing and stuff in the water.
Fizzing, yeah.
There's like so
Yeah.
many different things about icebergs that it's just, it's
Yeah.
exciting.
And they're
Yeah,
never
we're all in the same team here.
Capture the beauty of wildlife, icebergs, and incredible landscapes through your own camera lens. With expert instruction, workshops, guided tours, and more. Newfoundland Photo Tours. Book your experience today.
We go to 4 different locations on the iceberg and different angles. It looks like 4 different icebergs. How much it changes and stuff.
Yes.
People are amazed at what a good season we're having. And I have to keep reminding them, this is one iceberg.
What iceberg?
We have 1,000 pictures of one iceberg
Yeah.
on multiple dates from multiple angles. This is one iceberg. But one iceberg can make a season.
Oh yeah.
It
Yeah.
Triton last year, it's done it before, and there was one a few years back in Twillingate that there was like all the tour boats were around at their safe distance, thank goodness. And it was in I think Little Harbor, or it was off some trail near Little Harbor. But it was near the causeway. You guys just would know this area anyway. And it foundered. And there are pictures and video from every direction of that foundering. It's one that I will repost now and then, because the way it foundered, there was pieces of ice the size of dishwashers going sideways. And if boats had have been too close, like you can see all those boats go into action. Nobody was too close. They were all there, and they were all keeping an eye on each other. And plus they're all trying to stay out of each other's pictures. But it's a prime example of how it goes from majesty to danger. And that was the only iceberg that year. And it traveled around. It went to Merritt's Harbor, and it sat and looked pretty in Merritt's Harbor, and then it went back to Twillingate. And I think 6 weeks. That summer, Twillingate had one iceberg for 6 weeks, and Triton had one iceberg for 6 weeks, and it
That's the
made
season.
the season.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's it for season.
Mm.
Yeah. And how many icebergs do you need to see? If you see
All of them.
one, that's your bucket list. All of them. I totally agree. But if you, that's your bucket list.
Yeah.
That's your tick. More than your neighbor when you get back home. That's one more
Exactly.
than the guys up at Guns.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, I can't wait for the next one to show up. There should soon be something around St. Anthony area, I would think. Going through my Facebook memories, I've seen past years posts of polar bear warnings. Haven't seen any of that yet because it doesn't seem to be the same kind of pack ice this year. But it's also cyclical.
Yeah.
So, the water is warmer for whatever reason. That may be cyclical too, but it's got to also be impacting the currents.
Yeah.
And it's fun when you talk about icebergs. I went to a talk at the Fogo Island Inn one time. It was a geologist because they do geology and residence programs there. And this geologist, he was a submarine geologist. And he talked about things like how there are rock slides and whatnot under the water, just like there are on the water, and how that can affect transatlantic cables and things like that. But then he started talking about icebergs and how an iceberg can dig a trench 100 feet deep in a soft ocean floor and change all the channels and all about the floor. And I looked at a friend sitting beside me and I said, when did this become an iceberg talk? And he just laughed. He said, as you walked in, Diane. But it's fascinating all the ways that they are studied and all the ways that they can impact our life.
Yeah.
Whether it's a water source or a few drops in a bottle of vodka that gives you a branding situation. But they still impact our fishing grounds. And I find a lot of the research out of the Antarctic is interesting because that's where the most research is done. National research stations down there, and I find that quite interesting. Different environment, but it's still this, the same importance and the same fragility because, they're not forming as fast as they're going, I don't think, from anything that I know. But again, I'm just a person with a big Facebook page, so who knows?
I really, I would say, educational and a great way to find Iceberg Facebook page for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, when it comes to that, there's a lot of places or ways you could find icebergs. Like talking to locals, they can tell you. And like I said, the Newfoundland and Labrador website, they help. But definitely when it comes to real time, we find, Facebook and your page for sure. And, we always, once in a while reach out to you and, post pictures.
I'll stay big for now, Ned.
Yeah. I got to get out. I never saw icebergs this far south in a couple of years now, really. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll try to get up to 28 if it's there next week or something, probably.
Yeah, I got St. Anthony in my head again this year. We went in 2020. We were anxious with COVID and everything. So we went early. We went in June, which is first time ever going in June because I was a teacher. Couldn't go anywhere in June. And we really enjoyed that. And we had a great guy up there that we had kind of struck a deal with as far as our accommodations went. And he had a boat tour, Iceberg Alley boat tour, and he put his boat in the water and took us out. And in 3 days, we saw, I think it was 13 iceberg and 18 moose, something like that.
Nice.
So yeah, it was lovely, and it was it felt safe in a time that I wasn't feeling really safe. We were the first ones in the accommodations for the year and the whole bit. But I'm kind of in the mood to do that drive again. We drive well together, and we get to know the nooks and crannies, and so I'm hoping now that they soon get I'm hoping everybody gets an iceberg.
Yeah. Because
Like 2 years ago, it was pretty much everywhere, just kind of barely touched bottom still.
yeah,
And there's always, not always, but often that early one in April that will tuck into Fairyland. So, because there was one there, I think 2 years ago too, that was there early.
yeah,
So hopefully there'll be something down there. But when it tucks into Fairyland,
it stays for a while.
that's when it hit. Yeah, and that's when it hits the news.
Yeah,
Half of our population can get there, no problem at all. If they have vehicles, I mean, I recognize that as privilege. But when it hits Fairyland, it goes widespread in the media.
yeah.
So those glamour shots are all good
That's like
for promoting.
there was one time I said I'm going to do some iceberg pictures, and I left and I was going to Fogo, and I drove to home. I live in Wesleyville, so it's 4 hours away, and I turned on the news, and there was a big iceberg in Fort Amherst there in St. John's where I actually live, and I was like, oh man, you know what I mean? It was like
Yeah.
one of those iconic shots, still one of my favorite iceberg pictures, and you know, I was like, I just left there. I wasn't there like in the morning. 6 o'clock, I got home and I turned on the news, and there was like people everywhere. You know, like in a major city of the province,
Yeah.
and it was just like people everywhere. So anyway, I waited 4 days and I came back and it was still there. Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
It's big. There's a place called Bridgeport near Twillingate. I'd never heard of it. And I was working on the ferry, Fogo Island ferry that summer. And so I was sending people to it because I'd seen the pictures and whatnot. So I finally got a couple days off. Said, I got to find Bridgeport, wherever that is. I still have no idea how that iceberg got in there.
Yeah.
Makes no sense whatsoever. And it was another little community that had no place to spend $1. And I'm sitting there thinking, boys, if you had iceberg ice and we're selling Tang or Kool-Aid or purity syrup, do it for the fire hall or do it for the church or do it what you get through school, right? But find these little ways to even offer service to people. Like you go into community with no businesses. There's not even a place to find a washroom.
Mm.
Right? There's nothing. You like open the church hall and have crafts for sale or whatever, but I can't run it all. I can't organize it all. Now and then people see it and go, oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
All you can do is put the ideas out. If it's a good idea, somebody will pick it up. I mean, that's
Yeah, I don't mind. I've realized the last number of years that my real gift and skill is in networking and in connecting people together who need to meet each other.
Yeah.
And it's paid off for a lot of people. Doesn't necessarily pay off for me, but it's not why I'm doing it. I'm a big believer in paying stuff forward, and it comes back when you need it, and I've experienced that. And promoting all things Newfoundland. So I'm happy to do this with you guys and share pictures here and there, and feel free to toss up a few old iceberg pictures onto the page before I go all real time only. Because it's important that we talk about what we've got and that we appreciate what we've got.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was at the Fogo Island Inn one time with my father. I took him for dinner. And I said to the server, we've seen an iceberg already today. So it would be lovely if we could see a whale from the dining room. As she laughed and she said, I know a guy. So we had a lovely meal. My dad picking all different stuff. He said, well, it doesn't make sense for me to eat PEI beef here. I'll have the herring. Like all this. And it was just a lovely experience. And as we waited for dessert, a whale came up in front of the dining room windows.
awesome.
And she rushed right over and stood beside me and smirked. And she said, I called him. And the servers there were all from Fogo Island that evening. And they all, to a one, said to me, we used to see that or never think anything of it. And it looks totally different to us now when we realize how many people never grew up with it.
Yeah.
So this appreciation that we have for where we are, we're so fortunate to either have been born here or to have snuck in.
Mm.
With a 30-year teaching career. I've paid my dues. and to show it off and to be able to share it with other people.
That's probably the most important thing that I enjoy doing these tours is that you bring them out somewhere and run a Zodiac and a humpback whale breaches, and you look at the expression on someone's face is like just
Magic.
I'm still too when I saw it like a lot of times, but you see the excitement and stuff in people's faces. It just takes so much pride and joy. Is really cool.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I guess with that, I guess we've been talking now for a good hour and a bit. I know we could probably chat all day pretty much, but I think
You need a volume 2 down the road somewhere.
we could
Just
do
let
that
me
for
know.
sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We'll revisit it. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So, like I said, thanks for coming on and joining us here.
Absolutely.
And Corey, do you want to give you a little spiel of where you can find us?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Diane, the page, fantastic. I use it all the time personally when I'm planning a trip somewhere I want to go for some photographs. I always pop on there first to see what's on the go. And it's, you can say it's current, and it's details, and it tells me where to go, what I expect to see. Keep that up. Perfect. So, this is our 8th podcast. We publish anywhere where you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And of course, you want to look at all of our pretty faces. You'll see us on YouTube, on our channel there. My goal had the video edited so we look even better.
Thanks again there, Diane, for joining us. It's always nice to chat about icebergs and talk to you for sure. And as we say here, keep your eyes on the horizon and your heart in Newfoundland.
Have a great season, guys.
Thanks for joining us.